Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, this is Daniel Eduardo.
Hey, Commissioner, welcome. We're on standby.
We are okay to begin.
Okay.
Thanks, Evelyn.
Roxanne, who should start the meeting?
You can go ahead and, you know what, you can go ahead and call the meeting to order and then take a roll call. Or I can call the meeting to order if you'd like.
Okay.
Please.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. It's so nice to see all of you on Zoom. So this is going to be a joint special meeting of the Community Services Commission, the Mobile Home Fair Practices Commission, and the Public Art Commission. And so I'll turn it over to Evelyn to call roll for all three of the commissions.
And the Community Services Commission, Chairperson Megan Scarborough Echo.
Present.
Vice Chairperson Kimberly Barraza.
Present.
Commissioner Armand Ordian.
Present.
Commissioner Kevin Wilcoxon. Commissioner Kevin is not present. Commissioner Ronald Phillips Martinez.
Present.
Kevin is here. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. And the Mobile Home Fair Practices Commission, Chairperson Chris Martinez is absent. Vice Chairperson Daniel Eduardo.
Present.
Commissioner Cesar Perez.
Present.
Commissioner Roman Whitaker. Commissioner Roman Whitaker.
I saw that he was on the line here.
Yeah.
Might have been disconnected for a moment.
Welcome back to Whitaker. Commissioner Ashley Yanes is not present. And Commissioner Roman Whitaker. He might have lost connection. Okay, he's currently absent. And Public Art Commission, we have Chairperson Thomas Buck.
Present.
Vice Chairperson Bill Shinsky. Commissioner Shinsky. You're muted. Welcome back to Commissioner Shinsky. Commissioner E.J. Newmeyer.
Present.
Commissioner Cecilia Cruz Sendejas.
Present.
Commissioner Vanessa Becerra.
Here.
And Commissioner Bill Shinsky. I see him on here. I just,
Here.
thank you. And that completes the roll call.
Great.
I just joined. I was having technical difficulties. Roman Whitaker here.
Thank you.
Terrific. The next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Jesus, I see you on the line. Do you want to just lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. Thank you for joining us tonight. If everybody can join me in a Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the
of the
flag
United States of
of the
America
United States of America
and to the
and to the
republic
republic
for which it stands,
for which it stands,
one nation, under
one
God,
nation,
under God,
with liberty
indivisible,
liberty,
and justice for all.
liberty, and
Justice
justice
for all.
for all.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Evelyn, do you read the statement?
Yes, ma'am. The general rules of courtesy for virtual meetings are as follows. Please be mindful of background noise when joining the virtual meeting. Participants must mute all live streaming devices to avoid playback when speaking. Meeting participants must mute their microphone to help keep background noise to a minimum when they are not speaking. When your microphone is not muted, avoid activities that could create additional noise. Position your camera properly. If you choose to use a web camera, be sure it is in a stable position and focus at eye level if possible. If you will be sharing content during the meeting, make sure you have the files and/or links ready to go before the meeting begins. Members from the public wishing to provide oral testimony must follow the instructions on the agenda and/or online in order to provide public comment for agenda or non-agenda items. Members from the public wishing to provide oral testimony have 3 minutes to provide oral testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. Evelyn, do we have any public comments for items not on the agenda?
We do not.
Great. Okay, well, welcome everybody. I will go ahead and start our study session item. And that is, first let me introduce myself. I'm sorry. I'm Roxanne Diaz. I'm the city attorney for the city of Indio. Some of you may know some of the other attorneys in my office, depending on when your commission meets. And if we come to your meeting, I know we don't come to all of your commission meetings. However, but just wanted to say hello and thank you for taking time out of your evening to do this. I know we have some longstanding commissioners, so welcome back, and hopefully this will be a refresher for you, and we'll go over some of the new rules. We have some fairly newer commissioners, which is great, and so that way we all have an understanding of what the Brown Act is and conflicts of interest. And when we get to conflicts, you know, there's a lot of information, and I think what I hope you take away is just so you have enough information to recognize an issue, but you may, and no one expects you to know all the details. And I will provide Evelyn a copy of my PowerPoint so that she can send it out to you if you'd like a copy. I just probably will have her just send it out to everybody in case anybody needed a copy or would like one. That's about it. And so I think I have enough to fill the hour and a half. I'll try to be quick certainly at least hopefully have some time for questions at the end if you want to hold those. And certainly if there's any members of the public, we'll take public comment at the end as well. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Evelyn, am I able to do that? Great, thank you. Trying to get it to. See, I knew, oh, here we go. I knew I should have sent it to Evelyn from the beginning. There we go. Great. Terrific. So as I mentioned, the overview, I also threw in some meeting basics here as well, peppered through the presentation. And what you'll see tonight are some themes about conducting the public's business in an open and fair manner. Instilling confidence in the decision-making process is really the underlying theme of the open meeting laws, and also conflicts, and affording people and affording applicants and those that come before you the principles of due process. And the role of the commission, I mean, the commissions are our face of the city. The commission is really the first time that a constituent really has that face-to-face in a legislative body session for them, you know, whether it's art, the mobile home commission, the community services commission, the planning commission. And so you are that face of the city. The commission is with the exception of the planning commission, commission decisions are discretionary, they're advisory. The final decisions that are made that are called up to be appealed to the city council really are those of the planning commission, and they're not here today as part of this. We did a training for them previously. Your recommendations are submitted to the city council depending on the topic. With Mobile Home Fair Commission, I know that we haven't had an issue in a long time, and that said, your role as a commission really comes from our municipal code, but also statute as well. You're called up to hold meetings when there's an item of business. So I know from year to year, that doesn't always happen, but you're still part of the city, and that is appreciated. The responsibilities of all commissioners are, of course, to attend the meetings, to prepare in advance, allow others to speak, manage your own speaking time, respect what's been decided, and seek to understand other points of view, demonstrate kindness and respect, and act with honest and integrity. We adopted, as some of your staff liaisons may have told you, a new ordinance with respect to commissions. It's new in the sense that we've reorganized that whole section or that whole chapter in chapter 32 with respect to commission roles and responsibilities, and also the procedural aspects of commissions. But one of the things I wanted to bring up here was the attendance of commissioners at meetings in section 3206, which provides that if any commissioner is absent from 3 consecutive meetings or absent from more than 33% of meetings in any 12-month period, the commissioner is considered to have resigned from office. And once that occurs, that office is deemed vacant and the term of the commissioner automatically terminates. However, should that ever happen, notice of that termination will be provided to you by the city clerk, and you can request review by the city council if there were some underlying health conditions or unusual hardship. And so I just wanted to point that out to everyone here, all the commissioner members today. Effective commissions. What makes an effective commission? You have your discussions in public. You share information equally. There's the inclusion of the public. They're an important piece of what we do. There's full participation. There's fairness among different perspectives. Due process when it needs to be afforded. And there's predictability in the process as well. And so with that background, we will start with the Brown Act. And the premise of the Brown Act, which hasn't changed since it was adopted in the mid-1950s, is that all meetings of the legislative body of a local agency shall be open and public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting of the legislative body of a local agency, except as otherwise provided. And so this is central to the theme of the Brown Act, which is open and public meetings. So as we go through the Brown Act, first I want to discuss what is a legislative body. A legislative body, because that's who the Brown Act applies to. Legislative body, of course, is the city council, and it is subordinate boards and commissions that are created by formal action of the governing body, and that is all of our commissions here today. It also includes a standing committee with a regular meeting schedule, which is two members of a body two members of a body that have a regular meeting schedule, that have what's called continuing subject matter jurisdiction, and they exist year in and year out. And so in that case, for example, we have some other cities that will have a standing committee on the budget, and that exists just like a regular commission meeting. Commissions in our city do not have standing committees, but you can have an ad hoc committee, which is the next slide, and what is not a legislative body. An ad hoc committee is an advisory committee that's composed, again, of solely of the members of the legislative body. There are less than a quorum, so that is 2 members of a 5-member body. They have a single or limited purpose. It is, for example, perhaps it is looking at an ordinance with respect to smoking in the parks. If, you know, and I'm putting aside the issue of outdoor smoking and different things like that, but just let's say we wanted to prohibit smoking in the parks, you would charge an ad hoc with that issue. Its only purpose is to look at that issue. It's not perpetual, meaning it doesn't exist year in and year out. And the ad hoc committee is dissolved when their task is completed. When you've made a recommendation to the council with respect to that issue, then the ad hoc committee no longer exists. And that is not a legislative body. It's not subject to the Brown Act, so it's not subject to the agenda requirements that the Brown Act requires. And with that segue, we'll go into meetings. What is a meeting? A meeting of a legislative body is the gathering of a majority of members at the same time and same place to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on a matter of commission business, not just to vote. And it's on a matter that's within your subject matter jurisdiction. And here it's important to note that a meeting includes hearing the discussion, not necessarily talking about it, but it also includes hearing. So if 3 of you are at a social event and somehow the conversation goes into a matter that's within your realm, if 2 of you are discussing and 1 is hearing, that itself will be a Brown Act violation, even though the 3rd person is not speaking. What is not a Brown Act meeting? There are the ceremonial events. When we had an event for our new art piece on Highway 111, and let's say a majority of you were there, that is not a meeting. If you attend another meeting of the city, for example, if you attend the council meetings or you attend meetings of the planning commission, if there's 3 of your commissioners that do that, that is not also a meeting. and educational or policy conferences as well. If you attend a conference on art, or if you attend a league meeting, those are not meetings as well. Also not meetings are observation of standing committee meetings. Individual contacts just between two members is not a meeting because it's less than a quorum. However, and I'll talk about serial meetings in just a minute, conferences and again, seminars that are open to the public, community meetings as well. So what is an illegal serial meeting? And so that is a series of communication that's either direct or indirect, either with technology or with other people, by a majority of the commission to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on an item of commission business or potential commission business. The type of serial meetings are what's called the hub and spoke, where Commissioner A will talk to Commissioner B, let them know that they're really interested in this location for a piece of art, and a big decision is going to happen at the commission meeting. And so then A asks B what they think, and B tells A that they're not going to vote, they're going to vote no. And so A goes to C and says, hey, B and I are going to vote no on that. What's your vote? So that's the hub and spoke, and that's a prohibited serial meeting. The daisy chain is when Commissioner A talks to B, B then talks to C, C talks to D, and so forth. Again, to reach a collective concurrence in how the decision is going to be made or the discussion. And even an unintentional serial meeting is still illegal. And so it's interesting now in the time of technology that, technology is a great thing, but it's also a way now that you have these unintentional serial meetings via that technology. For example, if you hit reply all to an email that is emailed to you from your, let's say it's somebody that's interested in an issue with respect to a park, and they send an email to all of the commissioners, and one of you replies all to that that constituent. Well, then if you're having a conversation back and forth on that email, then you're engaging in a serial meeting because it's something within your jurisdiction, and hitting the reply all means that all your other commissioners are looking at the answer that you've told that member of the public. Text messaging to two other members of the commission. Social media, and we'll discuss a little bit more about that, but Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook can result in inadvertent serial meeting violations. I sent out a letter earlier this year, and that should have gone to all of the commissioners with respect to AB 992, which is a new social media rules. If you did not receive that letter, please let Evelyn know, and we'll make sure that you get a copy. But the state legislature finally, with the Brown Act, has modernized, I suppose, the Brown Act with respect to social media. I'm not sure when the last time is that you've actually talked to a person on the phone. I mean, these days we're texting everybody instead of, face-to-face, of course, with the pandemic, but certainly just, talking to them on the phone and whatnot. So AB 992 has put in some parameters with respect to social media, and that's your Facebook, your Instagram, your Twitter, and the like. So here are the rules. If somebody on your Facebook page asks you a question, it's okay to answer that question. You can tell them that the park is open from sun up to sundown, or you can provide information. However, if there is a post that you see, let's say it's on just another social media page, or even your own, that you've made a post, you as a commissioner, not even one commissioner, can have interaction based on that post. So I post something on my Facebook page, and I'm a commissioner, and I say, we're going to have a really important meeting tonight with respect to our parks, and we really need everybody to come out there. So we encourage you to come out, et cetera, et cetera. So another commissioner who I sit on the commission with cannot even post a like or an emoji or make a comment, because under AB 992, that is now prohibited. even though I've just said that two members of a commission can talk to each other, physically have that conversation, when you're on social media, that's prohibited. So that's a really important key, because when you think of what a meeting is, it's 3 members of the commission, but the California legislature had said in social media context, it's only 2 members. So that includes, again, any interaction, any responses, and any digital icons, which we all know as emojis. So also here, and I'm going to go to another topic again on serial meetings, is sometimes you will meet with staff just to prepare for the meeting, to ask questions. And those individual briefings by staff, they are permitted, as long as they're called unidirectional, meaning that staff is giving information one way, or you're giving information one way, and no one is there to describe the views of other commission members, and neither party asks for the commission members' views. So that's very important, but we want you to get information if things are not clear on the agenda, and those types of briefings are permitted. You may also have individual meetings with consultants or community members, just depending on what your role is and what you're doing. But again, it's making sure that you're not sharing other commissioner members' views, you're not making commitments, you're making your comments clear, it's not misinterpreted. And this really lends itself here with respect to items that are land use decisions. And so all of your commissions don't really delve into that, but I just wanted you to be aware of that information. So the next topic that we're going to go into are the rules governing meeting agendas. And so the goal of this is really just to let you know all that goes into putting together a meeting agenda. And the clerk and Evelyn, the staff really, they're the ones who know these rules, who put these agenda items together for you, Deborah, Jesus, Kevin. And so, but I think it's important for the commission to know as well what those rules are. So there are 4 types of meetings: regular, special, adjourned, and emergency. And with commissions, you usually, I guess, live in the world of regular meetings and special meetings. It's unusual and that you'll never have an emergency meeting. An adjourned meeting is also an unusual occurrence, but again, we'll just highlight what those mean. So with your regular meeting, an agenda has to be posted 72 hours in advance. There has to be a brief description of items on the agenda, and the posted agenda has to be freely accessible to the public. And so with the brief description of items of business, it doesn't have to be long, but it can't be so short that no one knows what item of business you're speaking to. So it can't be, I'd like to adopt, it can't be adoption of a resolution regarding art. That really doesn't tell you anything about what you're planning to discuss. Adoption of a resolution regarding arts in the park and adopting a new program for teens and tweens. That gives you more description. With respect to the posted agenda being freely accessible to the public, if you go to any city hall, outside of city hall, you'll see either a glass case or a bulletin board. And still, even in this day and age of technology, those posted agendas, the agendas are posted outside of City Hall. And the reasoning for that, and there's an Attorney General's opinion that speaks to this, is that somebody has to be able to get out of bed in the middle of the night, and this is the AG's opinion, and go down to City Hall, look at the bulletin board, look at the agenda, and say, hey, I'm going to come back tomorrow because I'm really interested in that item. There was another AG's opinion when kiosks were a very popular thing, and said, well, can we replace that bulletin board with the kiosk? And the Attorney General said no, because the kiosk can break down. Technology, as we noticed today a little bit, technology is not certain. And so, that bulletin board is pretty certain as well. So again, it's just making sure that the public knows what is going to be on the agenda. And then later, and probably I'd say maybe 5 years ago, maybe somewhere around there, the legislature also adopted a rule with respect to posting agendas on the city's website. Again, this only applies if a city has a website, but I don't know of any city that doesn't have a website today. And so an agenda not only has to be posted in its regular posting place, it also has to be posted on the website. And this is for, and it's interesting, this is for the governing body and for any legislative body that has a member of the governing body as a member. So what this means is that it really just means it applies to the city council. That said, we have a practice with the city clerk's office that we post all of our agendas on the city's website. Again, with technology, that's where a lot of people have access to know what's going on in City Hall. Also, as part of a regular meeting, the public has an opportunity to address the legislative body, the commission, on any item on the agenda. If this was city council, it would include closed session items, and also any non-agendized item that's within the legislative body's subject matter jurisdiction, and that's considered your general public comment period. Quickly on special meetings, and a lot of the same rules apply, but there are some differences. A special meeting can be called by the chair, or it can be called by a majority of the legislative body. Usually that is, and I've just told you, 3 of you can't get together to discuss something, but the legislature has said 3 of you can get together to discuss when you want to have a special meeting. Usually that's done with the help of the commission secretary in terms of calling that special meeting and what the topic is going to be. With a special meeting, the notice has to be posted 24 hours in advance, and notice must be received by each member unless waived. Notice also has to be sent to the media and the newspapers if they request notice in writing. The notice has to state the time and place of the meeting, and also all business to be transacted. The difference here with a special meeting and also with public comment is that public comments are limited to what is on the agenda only. A special meeting, again, needs to be posted. We've talked about that. This really applies to council, but just wanted to share that with you in terms of special meetings are prohibited from discussing salary or salary schedules of local agency executives, department heads, city managers, etc. So an adjourned meeting, a regular or special meeting can be adjourned to a specific time and place. And if no time is stated, then a meeting continues at the same hour for a regular meeting. Where you see adjourned meetings is where you don't have a quorum. And let's say the chair or the secretary or the clerk, if there's only 2 of you that show up to a meeting, you can adjourn that meeting to a stated time and place. And then you provide notice in the same manner as a special meeting. So if today was Monday, we had a meeting, no one showed up, let's say 2 people showed up, but it turns out everyone can make Wednesday, then that meeting on Monday can be adjourned to Wednesday. And what will occur is that the clerk will put outside of the door, when we used to come into City Hall, but they'll post a notice of adjournment, and that will be at the rear or the near the door of where the meeting entrance is held within 24 hours. And then that regular meeting that was adjourned still is a regular meeting. If you adjourn to a date not more than 5 calendar days, you don't have to renotice prior items, but we typically do, and you still need to post a notice of adjournment. I've not seen many questions with respect to adjourned meetings during the pandemic, probably because it's so easy now to facilitate a special meeting via Zoom that the concept of adjourned meetings really hasn't come up. Just FYI on emergency meetings, that's your 4th type of meeting. Again, dire emergency. Back last year in May, you saw that a lot of those meetings were called. And also if there's a crippling activity, work stoppage, some other activity for health and safety, usually that pertains to fires and floods. The emergency is determined by the legislative body. They can meet in closed session as long as they have a 2/3 vote. The key with emergency meetings, because it's a true emergency, is you don't have to comply with the posting or the notice requirements. There are other requirements in terms of notifying the press. You have to have minutes that are posted as soon as possible. The minutes need to remain posted for 10 days. And so that's really the key with emergency meetings. Next, I wanted to turn to agenda and agenda packets and just give you an overview with respect to that aspect of what goes into a meeting. All agenda and packets, the agenda face sheet itself, but also the items within that agenda must be publicly accessible. If any writing that's distributed to the legislative body is a public record as well. So if somebody submits something in the record, that is a public record that needs to be made available to anybody who requests it. There's a concept which is always kind of interesting in some aspects. The Brown Act hasn't really caught up with the times of, PDFs and emailing and whatnot. But there is a concept in the Brown Act that someone can request for a fee, a yearly subscription service to our agendas. It's to those who request it in writing. And if that occurs, then the same time the agenda is distributed to the legislative body, then it would also be distributed to that person who requested that subscription. Back in the old days, that would be via mail. You would have somebody who would really deliver your packet in person. Now it's all done online via an email to let you know that the agenda is ready and it's up for your review. So sometimes you'll have documents that are distributed after the agenda is posted. And in that case, the legislature adopted this rule a couple of years ago to make sure that the members of the public can also see that document. And so this rule provides that if there's a writing that's distributed after the agenda is posted within that 72 hours of the meeting, that writing must be available for public inspection at the same time. And the availability of that writing is listed on your agenda. It's typically City Hall or the library. The agenda has to contain the location, and you could also post it on the internet. Since we've been doing all our meetings in the virtual environment, I know that staff posts these types of things along with email comments and other writings on the face page of the agenda. Evelyn does just a great job, so kudos to her of getting all of that stuff done in terms of making sure that it's on the face page of our internet, of our website where the meeting is located. When we go back to real meetings in person, if there's a document that we as staff distribute, then we need to make a copy available to a member of the public. I know I always wanted to make sure that there was either a table or somewhere that extra copies were available to members of the public while we were having our live meeting. And if a document is distributed by a third person, usually they distribute it to just members of the city council and they don't always bring extra copies, then it must be available after the meeting. So usually in the morning, sometimes we will step out and make copies of those items. It just depends on the circumstances. There are times when, of course, that, well, let me say that differently. The rule is for an item that is not on the posted agenda, you cannot have a discussion or make a decision on such an item. And that's an absolute rule for special meetings. There is an exception for regular meetings, and that's what I wanted to talk about. But that said, I'm going to be speaking to items that are not on the posted agenda and what those exceptions are. So you can add an item to the agenda. However, this is very specific with respect to the circumstances. It needs to be an item that came to the agency's attention after the agenda was posted. There needs to be a need to take action before the next meeting, and you have to have a 4/5 vote to place that item on the agenda. The best example I can give, because this rarely comes up, but sometimes it does, is for a lot of state grants, they require a resolution by the city council to be adopted. So let's say our meeting is on Tuesday. We received late afternoon Monday an email that we need to adopt a resolution for that particular grant, and it needs to be in Sacramento by Friday. And so you have a meeting the next day. Staff will present the item to be added to the agenda, and you'll make these findings. We got the phone call Monday evening. we are in line for this grant. They need a resolution. It needs to get there by Friday. And so we need to take action before our next meeting, which would be in 2 weeks. And so then they present that, the city council adopts those findings by a 2/3 vote, which means by 4 affirmative votes. And once that item is added on the agenda, then what occurs is that you essentially magically hear that item. So there's really 2 steps in this. One is to add it on the agenda, and the second step is to hear the resolution and the discussion with respect to that. Some other exceptions, and you probably have engaged in these, is when you make a brief response to comments or questions from the public, when you ask for a clarification or reference from staff, when you make a brief announcement or report on your activities, or if you request the placement of an item on the future agenda. All of those are not items that are on the posted agenda, but these are exceptions that you can engage in. So sometimes we stray off topic or discussion of non-agenda items. Your staff liaisons are pretty good at trying to keep you on track. And so it's just, sometimes a member of the public will bring an issue up and it just warrants discussion, or just, it lends itself to have this robust discussion by the commission. And usually your staff liaison will step in and say, that's a great, good conversation. However, this is not an item on the agenda. We can put this on the next agenda if you would like. And that way you can have a discussion with respect to that item that just came up from, let's say, a member of the public, and not be in violation of the Brown Act. Just mostly housekeeping matters. Really the first one just pertains to the commission, is to publicly report individual votes or abstentions. However, in our Zoom environment, that is a roll call vote is required for every item. I wanted to talk a little bit about public participation. Members are an important part of our meetings, and the members of the public do have a right to speak on any item of interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city, and that's your general public comment period. And they also have the right to speak on a specific item of business before or during the body's consideration of that item at any meeting. The public also is not required to register or not required to submit a speaker card. Now that we're doing virtual meetings, certainly it's this rule. I don't believe that we don't violate this rule, because from the practical aspects of having members of the public need to call in or provide an email, or we call them back, or now it's a little bit easier, I think, with Zoom, because they have that Zoom information, and then the secretary can recognize them. So it's a little bit different in the world that we're living in now, but under the regular rules, we cannot require them to have them give us their name or their address. We can ask, but they're not required to do that. Time limits are perfectly fine. They're okay. A member of the public could record a meeting if they wanted to, as long as it doesn't disrupt our meeting. They're permitted, again, to speak on any item within your jurisdiction. They can be required to abide by rules of decorum if you should have those rules, but they cannot act in a way that would disrupt the commission meeting. As well, a member of the public has rights with respect to criticism, meaning that they have a right to criticize the chair, the commission members, the staff. They can't be forced to stop or be excluded for their comments or their critique, but the chair can enforce time limits or prohibit any kind of action that would cause an actual disruption of the meeting. However, that's usually when we're live and in person. In terms of the public comments and commissioner questions, you can ask the speaker to clarify any comments that they have after their time is expired. That's the key. Commissioner questions to speakers shouldn't be for the purpose of debating an issue. And again, and just, every city does it differently. Public comments are not required to be included in the minutes verbatim. They can be done in summary form, or they can be done in just listing the name of the person who provided a comment. Just closed sessions, you'll never have a closed session. Just the nature of your business that you do doesn't lend itself to it, but councils do, and they're strictly limited to certain topics. The COVID modifications that we've been under for the last year, Zoom meetings are fine. All commissioner members or only a few can call in. We're required to either live stream the Zoom type meeting to allow public viewing, whether it's via the Zoom, whether it's a live stream feed, whether it's a Facebook stream. There has to be some way for the public to view our meeting. We're not required to have the public or the commission physically present in the chambers. We are required to allow the public to submit comments on agenda items or public comment electronically. The agenda needs to explain how to submit those public comments as well. So that is it for the Brown Act. I'm just looking at my time here. I think we're pretty good. So conflicts. Conflicts, there's a lot of details, a lot of statutes. The Fair Political Practices Commission governs the issue or governs the world of conflicts of interest for local jurisdictions. And they have in the past, in the last couple of years, taken it upon themselves to attempt to make the rules easier and more reader friendly, but that's not always the case. There are a lot of definitions, a lot of exceptions. So really, again, what I stated out in the beginning, the goal is for you to be able to identify conflict issues so that you can either call staff or the city attorney. I think too that the nature of what you do will not always lend itself to every type of conflict financial interest, but I did want to give you an overview of everything. I think the most typical one you'll see is real property, and so we'll go ahead and get into that. So the Political Reform Act of 1974, if you notice the date, it was adopted after Watergate, is what governs conflicts of interest. And the basic rule here is that a public official may not participate in any decision if it is reasonably foreseeable that the decision will have a material financial effect on the official's financial interest. And I will break it down for you in terms of the key aspects of it, which really is a material financial effect and your own financial interest, of which there are several. And all of you fill out a Form 700 form. They're due April 1st. I'm sure that you've already filled yours out already, but that really is the guide, I think, in terms of what those material financial interests are of yours with respect to the questions that they ask and the schedules that you fill out, with respect to real property, with respect to your income, also gifts as well, and any business positions that you may have. So participating in a decision under the conflict rule, the basic rule, is much more than a vote. If you have a conflict of interest, then you need to not participate in what's called making this decision. You cannot participate in the steps leading to the decision, and you cannot use or attempt to use your official position to influence the ultimate decision. And what this means is that if you have a conflict, you cannot then, outside of the meeting, go to your fellow commissioners and urge them to vote yes, if that's what you would like them to do, because that is participating in the decision, even though you're not doing it in the dais and you've stepped down. So your financial interests, what are they? They're your real property interest, including leases of $2,000 or more. They're your sources of income of $500 or more, 12 months before a decision is made. They're your business interests and investments worth $2,000 or more, gifts of $500 from a single source over 12 months before the decision, and your personal finances, whether that's expenses, income, assets, or liabilities. So we'll talk about here really quickly your real property interest. This is property that's owned by you or your spouse or another person together, owned by your spouse separately. We're a community property state, so your spouse's income property is imputed to you. If your dependent children have property, that's imputed to you as well. And if you have an interest as a tenant in real property, that's a leasehold interest, not a month to month. That is a real property interest. So if the decision will have a financial effect on your real property interest, then you have a conflict and you cannot participate. You may not participate if there's a direct interest, which means that there is a decision that's going to approve or revoke a land use permit for your property. Again, this is something that doesn't really come up in the charge of your commission or changes the general land use designation or zoning for your property. However, I think the other rule with respect to what's called the 500-foot rule is that there's a bright line rule that if the property is within 500 feet of your property, or excuse me, let me rephrase that. If the property subject to the decision is close to your property within 500 feet, you are presumed to have a material financial effect. The best one I can think of, let's pick the Art Commission. Let's say that the Art Commission is looking at determining where they're going to place a new piece of art. And the location that they picked is right next door to your house. Well, that's less than 500 feet, and you aren't able to participate because it's presumed that that decision will impact and have a material financial impact on your property, whether it's in the negative or the positive. And so you would have to recuse yourself and not participate in that decision. The FPPC also provided another rule, which is the 500 feet to 1,000 feet. And this one is a little bit more squishy, meaning that there's room for interpretation. Here on this materiality standard, it says that if that, let's say again, using the art example, if your property is located within 500 feet to 1,000 feet, and if the decision would change your property's development potential, highest and best use, the character of your property, including traffic levels, view, privacy, noise level, market value, and then that decision, if let's say it affects one of these items, and it could, an art piece that's very popular that everybody wants to see would bring traffic to your neighborhood, even though you're not next door, and let's say you're 880 feet away, it does change the character of your property. And so in that instance, you would have to abstain, and excuse me, recuse yourself. More than 1,000 feet, it's presumed to have no material impact or effect. So leases, the same concepts, apply. Again, it's if you have a lease, if you rent your home via a lease, if the decision that you're going to make will have will impact the change of the termination date of your lease, increase or decrease the potential rental value of the property, increase or decrease the value of the property if you have a right to sublease, or change your allowable use of the property or your enjoyment and use of the property. So in that same art example, I would say that, again, the traffic impact would affect your enjoyment of your own property, and therefore you would not be able to participate. There is no material financial interest if the decision only concerns repairs, replacement of maintenance, existing facilities, water, sewer, storm. Again, none of these items are within your jurisdiction, but just pointing them out to you. The materiality for sources of income. You have a source of income, again, $500 or more in the 12 months preceding the decision. Your salary, that's your income from sales, promised income. If the decision you're about to make affects your source of income, then you wouldn't be able to participate. So for example, let's say you work for the art fabricator and the city is buying that piece. You would not, even though you're not making the ultimate decision with respect to the purchase of it, you are still engaging in that conversation, and that still has an impact. It could have an impact on your income. Then you would have to recuse yourself. The other, this only applies here to planning commission, so I'll skip that over. One thing I did want to say about campaign contributions, campaign contribution on the city council level does not disqualify them from participating. The rule is different if it was a campaign contribution to a member of the planning commission. So materiality standards for business entities and investments. Let's say you own, here it's again $2,000 in investments in business interest, or again, a business interest if you have, if you're in a management role as well. Again, I don't think that this will come to fruition with respect to your jurisdiction. But let's say you, for some reason, had a startup company, again, who wanted to sell a piece of art to the city, and you sit on that commission. However, let's say that you've invested in that startup company and your investment was worth more than $2,000, then you would not be able to participate in that discussion. And I will just skim over these. This one's an interesting one. I call it the catch-all. It's when there's a economic interest in your personal finances, that is your personal expenses, your assets or liabilities. If the decision is going to cause you or your spouse or your dependent children to be given a measurable financial benefit or loss. Again, this rarely comes up. It usually comes up in the context, and a special rule was adopted when, for example, the city council would appoint, and they do this yearly, appoint fellow council members to different commissions where there's a stipend. The FPPC stated that you cannot participate in that decision because it's going to affect your personal finances, meaning that if you get on that commission or that third party commission, you will get a stipend of, let's say, $200 a meeting. But then they built in an exception where we post a form. If it's listed on that form, then everybody can participate in the form. I forget what the form is called. I want to say it's 860, but that might be wrong. But in any event, again, probably not going to be something that comes up within the bodies that you're participating in terms of your commissions. What does come up possibly are the gift rules, and the gift rules apply to everybody across the board, and it pertains to the sources of gifts. And under the gift rule is that you cannot accept a gift that is more than $500 from a single source in a 12-month period prior to a decision. This includes cash, presents, meals, food, drinks, entertainment, travel, and lodging. So for example, let's say we had a great big push to change the parks to turf, and the turf company had a big, I don't know, they took everybody out to dinner. They took folks to the Dodger game. They took commissioners, let's think of some other event. And all of a sudden, over the course of 12 months, you've aggregated $500 from them in the value of those outings, of the meal, the entertainment. So then two things, that essentially becomes an issue for you under the gift rules. It could impact if you participate in the decision or not, depending on the 12-month rolling period. But the key here for gifts is not accepting more than $500 from a single source, and you have to list any of those gifts on your Form 700, which is any gift that aggregates $50 or more. Those get listed. And then again, the gift rule for this year, the calendar limit is $520 is the single source limit. And here's the rule that an official cannot participate in a decision affecting a person who is given a gift of $500 or more in the 12 months prior to the decision. And again, the prohibition of gifts of $520 or more and disqualification depends on the calendar year versus the 12-month prior. And so it's a rolling 12 months, or the calendar year is where you have to list your gifts on the Form 700. And that's how you get to this rule of $500 or more, because it could be in 2 calendar years, which means you could have accepted all of those gifts because they were in different calendar years. But in the last 12 months, if those gifts equaled $500 or more, then you have a conflict. So hopefully I explained that a little bit better. So the gift rules, there are exceptions always to rules for the most part. And so you can take gifts from your family, and that's pretty broad in terms of including nieces and nephews and aunts, and also first cousins and parents-in-law, brothers-in-laws, spouses of any of the above. Other exceptions are and these are where the FPPC tried to make the gift rules modernized. So they've recognized that maybe not everyone has in a long-term relationship, and that maybe commissioners actually date other people. And so in that case, you can accept a gift from your date if you're in a dating relationship. You can accept gifts from your long-term relationships. It's called the BFF rule, your best friend forever rule. Certainly if there's a passing in your family, and there's, you see lately, there's GoFundMe pages with respect to that, bereavement offerings, again, not a gift. If let's say your plumbing you burst in your house and your neighbor happens to be a plumber, and he or she came over and fixed your plumbing and didn't want you to pay for it, and let's say it was over $50 or it was several $100s, you can accept that as an act of neighborliness and kindness, or human compassion. If you have an existing personal or business relationship, if you win a prize in a contest, if you're given a trophy or an award, if you go to a wedding and there happens to be a swag bag at the wedding. Disaster assistance is not a gift. Home hospitality, where somebody invites you for a wonderful meal, that is not a gift either. If you get an inheritance, if you are given a free admission to a conference, for employees, leave credits. Let's say, there's a death or a grave illness that you may have. There's a policy that you can donate so that employee who's ill can have more time off, and be given more sick leave. And so that is not a gift as well. So there's another concept in the conflicts called the public generally exception, that if the effect of your decision on your financial interest is indistinguishable from its effect on the public generally, a conflict will not exist. And this, again, rare probably in our universe here, but it has to affect a significant segment of the public. And the effect on your financial interest is not unique and compared to the effect on the significant segment. I'll skip over there. So what happens if you're disqualified? Again, we talked a little bit about that. You cannot discuss or talk about it with staff or your colleagues, but you do at the meeting where you do have to abstain. Let's say it's our art example and you live right next door. You would have to say before, once the item is identified and before the discussion starts, you would say, Chair, I'd like to state for the record that I have a conflict of interest because I own property within 500 feet of the decision that's going to be made tonight. And therefore, I'm unable to participate and I will recuse myself. And then you would leave the chambers after stating that. And it's very important that you state the reason for your conflict so that it goes in the minutes. Certainly, if the city attorney is there, if I'm there, I always help as well if it just doesn't come out right. But if you're on a commission where there's no attorney that is at your commission meeting, then certainly it's important to identify these conflicts early, and that way we can work with your staff liaison as well. And so if we were all in a live setting, you would leave the chambers and come back when the item is done. On a Zoom setting, then we would ask you to turn off your camera and then to turn off your mic. and then we would text you when it's ready to come back. And therefore you're not, live as part of the meeting. You can participate if you have a conflict as a member of the public, but only for your personal interests. So it really comes into play only when it's pertains to your property. So in my art example, if you lived next door within 500 feet and it affected your real property, you could go into the audience and make a comment with respect to that because it affects your property. If it was the other example that I gave, that you were an investor in the company who's trying to sell the city art, you would not be able to go into the audience and participate. This is a very limited rule as well. Just something just to let you know with respect to what's called mass mailings, and if there's newsletters sent out. I think we've been a little bit better in the last couple of years in sending different kinds of newsletters or items that are sent to the public at public expense. And the rule in here, it pertains to all of you because all of you are determined to be public officials. If a newsletter, for example, includes the photos or the names of public officials or features you in an article, let's say it talks about you, talks about the chair who was instrumental in changing all of the parks to turf. If that publication or newsletter is physical, meaning that it's a tangible item, and there's 200 or more of them that are mailed or delivered within 30 days, and more than $50 of public money was used, then it's determined to be a mass mailing. And in that case, it would be prohibited by the FPPC from sending out that mailer. And the logic there is that it shouldn't, that you as an individual should not be featured or highlighted any more than or differently than your fellow colleagues. That doesn't apply to the website or city-sponsored social media. So, for example, let's say one of you was instrumental in bringing an art piece, to the city, and your picture was there. We put it on social media. The mass mailing rule does not apply. This is interesting. Trains, planes, and buses. There is a provision in the California Constitution that really comes from the stagecoach days of railroad days, I should say, where an elected and appointed official is prohibited from taking free or discounted passes on airplanes, trains, or buses. And for elected officials, you can be disqualified from office. There's some exceptions like your mileage programs, your upgrades, that happens to everybody. But the best example I can give is many, many years ago in Los Angeles, we had a mayor, Antonio Villaraigosa, and a new Virgin Atlantic plane came to LAX. LAX is essentially an entity of the city of Los Angeles. And so they were going to go cross country, take the plane from here to New York. And there was a great picture of the mayor on the tarmac really waving goodbye to everybody. Because of this rule, he was prohibited from taking that free flight across country. And that is a provision of the California Constitution. So I've always included it in this presentation, really just as a item of interest, if anything else. Government Code Section 1090, this is where a public official cannot make a contract which he or she is financially interested in. Again, it's not something that would come up in the context here, but I did want to just let you know that there is such a concept as Government Code Section 1090, and these are the slides with respect to it. Meeting management, just really quickly, and actually we're going to be wrapping up soon. Just wanted to throw this in here. Rules of procedure at meetings, establish orderly conduct at meetings. We're pretty informal here with our commissions, with the adoption of Robert rules, or the league uses Rosenberg's rules of order. But that said, usually those rules are used when you're unable to manage your meeting, just as a whole. But the goals of meeting management for all of you and for those of you who sit as the chair is to balance, again, public participation with efficiency, to make meetings run efficiently and fairly, to relieve meeting anxiety. Sometimes you'll have to deal effectively with disruptive people, to present a competent, civil, and efficient public face when you're running your meetings, and of course, to comply with the legal requirements of the Brown Act, privacy rights, and due process. General meeting rules, you have to have a quorum to transact business. The default rule is more than half the body. 3 of 5-member commission is a quorum. A majority of a quorum is sufficient to make a decision unless there's a special rule that applies. Usually it comes from state statute, or sometimes it'll come from an ordinance, and less than a quorum can adjourn a meeting. The role of the chair serves as the presiding officer at commission meetings and facilitates the proceedings. The chair will solicit opinions from the commissioners. The chair tries to ensure a focused discussion. And the question always arises, does the chair participate less? The chair can participate in all of the discussion in the same manner. It's typically done as their privilege to go last, but the chair can make and second any motion. The chair also manages public communications at meetings. Again, the public has the right to speak and criticize. You can set time limits. They enforce the speaking limits. The use of speaking cards encourages the use of the microphone. Now texting the audience, it can be seen. And again, avoiding commissioner debate with speakers. The managing of commissioner communications by the chair is to facilitate discussion, ensure that all commissioners have an opportunity to speak, utilize a commissioner speaking order, summarize and call for motions, state the action of the commission. The motion to adopt the resolution fails, and ensure a fair process. Just really quick, summary of making motions, when to make a motion, how to make a motion, amending a motion, motions to reconsider. And so a motion to reconsider here, this is when a motion to reconsider is when an item has passed and you have second thoughts. And so in order, and this is a very procedural Robert's Rule of Order, and I've rarely seen it happen at any meeting. I also serve as the league parliamentarian for the League of Cities, and I have so for the last 6 years, I think, maybe 7. Every once in a while, I see somebody try to use this. It's not always done correctly. But if you want to reconsider a motion, it has to be done at the same meeting where the first vote was taken. And the motion to reconsider the item, to reconsider the vote, needs to be made by a member who voted in the majority of the original motion. And when you think about that, that makes sense, because it's usually somebody who voted in the majority, who now has second thoughts and wants to reverse their decision. And so that motion for reconsideration has to be made by somebody in the majority, and it requires a majority vote. So clarity of motions for commissioners, really the number one tip is to be clear. I make a motion that we adopt resolution 1234, approving a conditional use permit for a restaurant at 123 Main Street. I make a motion that we recommend that the city council reconsider revisions to the city's PUD ordinance. And so examples of motions that are not clear: motion to approve. Well, approve what? Especially if there's a lot of discussion. We encourage staff in doing their staff reports to make sure that there's some clear direction there to help you with respect to what the recommendation is. When to do a roll call vote, again, it's simply because of the pandemic and because of the emergency orders that were adopted by the governor to loosen the rules with respect to the Brown Act in some instances, is why we are required to do a roll call vote now for every item. However, when all of that gets lifted and we go back to our regular meeting schedules inside of the City Hall, a roll call vote usually occurs when you have a controversial item or an application that is before you. With respect to the council, a roll call vote is required for adopting a resolution, an ordinance, or making a payment of money. But I know previously on fairly routine items, the chair would ask, all in favor, any objections? And if no one objects, then it's very straightforward. Everyone's in favor and not a roll call is necessary. But I think that here, I think our commission secretaries like having a roll call vote. It makes it easy and simple. And so, but it's not always necessary, but right now in pandemic time it is. So how many votes are required? On general matters, approval of the minutes, direction to staff, a majority of the quorum is sufficient. So if you have 2 in favor, 1 against, 1 absent, and 1 abstain, a 2-1-1-1, that actually is an approval. Again, I mentioned what is required by law, a three affirmative votes. And then again, this relies to council. There are times that the law requires 4 affirmative votes out of the 5 for urgency ordinances, eminent domain, interim ordinances. A tie vote. There could be an occasion where there's a tie vote. Of course, that means there's only 4 of you there. And so a tie vote results in no action, and a new motion can be made that results in a majority vote. So when all members are present and 1 person abstains, so a 2-2-1, and again, this lends itself more to the Planning Commission or the City Council really, a tie vote on appeals from a lower body's action is considered a denial. And that makes sense because it's a 2-2-1 vote. But if a tie vote results because of an absence of a member and not a conflict of interest, then we always suggest continuing the item. If a tie vote is because there's a conflict of interest, a continuation wouldn't make sense because you're always going to only have 4 members. Again, probably very rare that you have tie votes, but again, just wanted to mention that. A member who is absent from a meeting should generally abstain from the vote to approve the minutes of that meeting unless they weren't there. But that's just a general rule of thumb. Again, public hearing items doesn't apply in our case here. And that is it. Not bad, 6:48. I'm available to answer any questions if anybody has any, and I will stop sharing my screen. Great. If anybody has questions, feel free to chime in. Okay.
It was a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot. And I talk fast. So, if there are no questions, then.
Hi, Roxanne.
Hi there, Jesus.
Hello. So going way back to the beginning of your presentation, I know there's always been questions about this. If you can clarify, you mentioned, it was mentioned that if the commission, a quorum or more attends some kind of public event where that's not associated with the commission specifically, they attend another commission meeting or,
correct,
or an event like that, and there's a quorum or more, or there's a quorum, can they talk amongst themselves, even the 5 of them, if they're present, as long as they don't, if they're talking about what they did over the weekend or how the weather's going?
yes.
Can you provide some clarity on that?
Of course. And yes, they could talk amongst themselves with respect to topics that are not, about their commission. I think what the issue becomes is an issue of perception, is that anytime somebody from the outside looks at 3 members of a body, of a legislative body, whether it's whatever commission it is, they will always assume that they're talking about city business. And so even though the 3 of you can, let's say, attend the meeting of the Planning Commission and you're all sitting in the same row and you're talking about the soccer game, whatever, the Dodgers, whatever it is, then that's perfectly fine, but it's an issue of perception. And so one will perceive that all three of you are hushed and huddled and talking about city business when that's not the case. So we always say, try to break it up, and not make it so obvious. But certainly, hopefully that's helpful.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Hi, Deborah.
Hi. So earlier you were talking about posting of the meeting agenda, and you were talking about accessibility of the attachments. And so on the electronic version of the agenda, there are
links.
But you also said that documents can be added within the 72 hours between when the agenda was posted and when the meeting occurs. Are there any more specifics on that?
So it's not necessarily that documents can be added. It's really more the exception. And what that rule says is that after the agenda has been posted, if for whatever reason staff is distributing an item to the entire commission or the council, then that same document needs to be provided to the public. And so the goal, of course, from the staff perspective, is that everything that you need for that agenda item gets in that agenda item right before it gets posted, and that the commissioner has everything. But should there be some random item that just we were waiting for information, maybe there was a letter or something like that, then you can provide it to the commission. But at the same time, you also have to provide it to the public. So in this era of Zoom at the moment that we're in, the only way to do that is to make sure that additional document gets posted on our website so that a member of the public can see it when they go to the website, and look for the item.
Okay, and one more thing.
Of course.
So we do the old school posting of the paper version. So in terms of attachments, someone, like you said, wants to pop up in the middle of the night and say, hey, let me have a look at what's going on. They're not going to have access to attachments or like.
Correct.
So that's expected. Okay.
The only requirement is that the posting of the agenda itself get placed outside. And even though technically the posting of the agenda doesn't have to occur on the website, we do that as well. And I think that is even more necessary in terms of transparency in this era of COVID, and making sure that everybody has access to the agenda one way or the other, at least to know what the items are.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay, if there are no more questions, then I will leave you to the rest of your evening, and just want to thank everybody. I think there was a question on whether if there are any attorneys as part of our commissioners. I thought Evelyn, somebody had asked. We can arrange for MCLE credit. So my assistant will reach out to Evelyn, and if you need MCLE credit, please reach out to Evelyn as well, and we'll make sure that you get that certificate.
I'd like MCLE credit.
I thought it was you, Roman. I was pretty sure. So we'll make sure that we can arrange for that.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and have a good evening. Bye.